Year $100,000 BC. You wake up on the African savanna. The sun is already brutal. The ground is hard and hot. There are things out there in the grass that want to eat you. You have a rough stone in one hand, and at no point in this moment does the word jacket cross your mind. And yet, at some point, someone picked up a dead animal's skin, wrapped it around their body, and changed the entire story of our species. But when exactly and why? Because almost every other animal on the planet never needed to do this. Lions don't wear clothes. Hippos don't wear clothes. The gorilla, which is objectively more impressive than most people you've ever met, has never once thought, I need something for this weather. So what made us different? And how do we even know when it started? The answer involves brilliant detective work, a 50,000-year-old bird bone from a Siberian cave, and, this part is real, lice. Which I know sounds unpleasant. It is, but it's also genuinely one of the most fascinating pieces of scientific investigation in all of human history. Stay with it. Here's the first strange fact about ancient humans. Most large animals come with built-in protection. Thick fur, dense coats, natural insulation. The gorilla has it. The bear has it. The elephant doesn't need it, but you get the idea. Large creatures generally come equipped. And then there's us. Virtually bare skin, no coat, no fur, exposed. This wasn't an accident. Ancient humans living on open grasslands needed to travel enormous distances on foot, tracking prey for hours across sun-baked plains. In that environment, a thick fur coat isn't protection. It's a problem. You overheat, you slow down, you collapse before your target does. Instead, the human body is equipped with something remarkable: millions of sweat glands. We are among the most efficient heat-releasing creatures on Earth. We can outlast prey not because we're faster, and we absolutely aren't, but because we don't overheat while they do. We cool ourselves and keep going. But this design comes with a cost. Bare skin means vulnerability. Cold temperatures at night, sunburn in the day, thorns, insects. And the moment ancient humans began pushing into colder climates, that vulnerability became critical. Something had to fill the gap. And that is when the story of clothing begins. Here's the problem with studying ancient clothing. It doesn't survive. Animal hide, plant fiber, woven grass, all of it rots. A 150,000-year-old shirt does not exist anywhere in the world. So how do researchers figure out when clothing actually started? The answer came from somewhere completely unexpected. Lice. There are two kinds of lice that live on humans: head lice, which live in hair, and body lice, a separate variety that live exclusively in clothing, in the folds of fabric, in the seams, in the layers. Body lice cannot survive on bare skin. They need cloth. Without clothing, body lice simply don't exist. Researchers at the University of Florida analyzed the DNA of both types and calculated when body lice diverged from their head louse relatives. And here's the critical point. That split could only happen one way: when humans started wearing clothes and body lice had a new habitat to move into. Their finding: body lice split from head lice somewhere between 83,000 and 170,000 years ago. Which means ancient humans were already wearing some form of body covering between 83,000 and 170,000 years ago. Not because archaeologists found an ancient shirt, but because the DNA record of parasites tells us exactly when we got dressed. The lice were there, they adapted, and they kept the receipt. But lice can only tell us when. The question of why has multiple answers, and they're all true at once. The first answer is the obvious one: protection. Sharp thorns, biting insects, cold nights, sun that burns. If you're moving across open terrain with bare skin, any covering helps. And the archaeological record confirms this. Stone scrapers specifically shaped for stripping flesh from animal hides appear across African and Near Eastern sites roughly 100,000 years ago. These tools become more refined over time, the signature of a practice that was growing culturally important, not just occasionally useful. But protection alone doesn't explain everything, because around the same time something else appears in the record. Around 100,000 to 120,000 years ago, ancient humans weren't only scraping hides, they were decorating things. Ochre red iron oxide, a natural pigment, shows up in burial sites, on shells used as containers, on objects with no obvious functional purpose. Archaeologists believe people were painting themselves, their tools, and their coverings. The logic of decoration only makes sense in a social context. You don't paint an animal hide to make it warmer. You paint it to say something: who you are, what group you belong to, what your status is, whether you've earned the right to wear a particular skin. Researchers believe that clothing, even in its earliest form, was never purely practical. The moment you wrap yourself in a leopard skin instead of a plain brown hide, you're making a statement. You're communicating. The very first piece of clothing was probably already fashion. The most striking single piece of evidence in the entire history of clothing is very small. In Denisova Cave in Siberia, archaeologists found a needle made from the hollow bone of a bird. It's approximately 50,000 years old. It has a tiny hole drilled through one end. Think about what this required. Someone looked at a thin, hollow bone and imagined a tool that didn't yet exist. They figured out how to drill a hole that small without splitting the bone, and then they used it to push thread through two separate pieces of material and join them together. This is not survival instinct. This is engineering, design thinking, abstract problem solving, imagining a solution to a problem before the solution exists. And what's remarkable is that this needle wasn't made by the people we typically imagine when we think of ancient human history. It was found in the same cave layer as evidence of Denisovans, a distinct group of ancient humans, separate from modern humans, who lived across parts of Asia. They were making sewn clothing before modern humans reached that region. This tells us something important. Clothing wasn't invented once by one group of clever humans who then spread the idea everywhere. The basic human drive to cover, decorate, and communicate through what you wear arrived independently wherever ancient intelligence reached a certain threshold. Then came the crisis. Between roughly 120,000 and 70,000 years ago, the Earth went through dramatic climate shifts. Glaciers expanded, temperatures dropped, large portions of previously habitable land became hostile. The global human population, the entire human population on Earth, may have dropped to somewhere between 10,000 and 30,000 individuals, not per region. Total. We came extraordinarily close to not existing anymore as a species before we'd even properly gotten started. In that context, clothing stopped being a social signal. It became the line between life and death. The groups who survived weren't simply the strongest. They were the ones who had mastered body covering, who knew how to scrape and preserve animal hides, how to stitch seams that held against wind and rain, how to layer and wrap against temperatures the human body wasn't designed to handle alone. The technology of clothing is one of the reasons we're still here. After the crisis passed, something shifted again. Around 30,000 years ago, evidence of woven plant fibers appears, and these fibers weren't just any color, they were dyed. Multiple colors, from a cave in Dzudzuana in the country of Georgia. Someone looked at a piece of functional cloth that was already doing its job perfectly well as protection, and thought, this needs to be a different color. Not for warmth, not for survival, for something else entirely. Clothing had become language. Different garments communicated rank, profession, group identity, spiritual status. Priests dressed differently from hunters. Leaders wore things others were not permitted to wear. The dead were buried in coverings that reflected who they were in life. By the time human settlements grew into towns and cities, textile production had become one of civilization's foundational technologies. And eventually, specific fabrics, silk, linen, wool, drove trade routes and trade wars that reshaped the map of the world. So when did ancient humans start wearing clothes? Somewhere between 83,000 and 170,000 years ago, based on the best evidence we have. But the real answer is never just a date. It started as protection, a way to survive what bare skin could not. It became communication almost immediately, a way to say who you are in a world full of other people watching and judging. It became survival technology when the climate turned hostile. And it became art, industry, identity, and culture as human society grew more complex. Every morning, without thinking about it, you decide what to put on, what to show, what to cover, what to signal about who you are today. And those decisions are the same decisions a human being was making 150,000 years ago, wrapped in an ochre-stained hide beside a fire on the African savanna. The materials changed. The impulse never did. What's the most meaningful piece of clothing you own and why? Leave it in the comments. I'll see you in the next one.